especially the terms concerned with structuralism, post-structuralism, and deconstruction. So far we have seen a few of the important theorists, and we saw language as a system of science, semiotics as to its many levels of identification, then science systems, how linguistic signs are arbitrary and therefore used only by convention, Lang and Perol, and the branches of semiotics. Then how the signs are made to be or understood by Derrida to be two sides of a coin, signifier and signified, and how they are inseparable and cannot exist one without the other. And we saw see a sign at the connotative level and the denotative level, signification at both levels, and then the arbitrariness of the sign itself, how the sign was arbitrary in the sense the signifier and signified had no logical connection between them, how they were inseparable, and signs tending to acquire meaning only through difference. So meaning is understood to be an agreement between a community of language speakers, that would be the Lang, and the individual utterance would be the Perol. So at the connotative level, how we understand signs is through culture, through convention. How a certain word seems to have, dog has become synonymous with faithful. Yeah, whenever you think of loyalty, trust, faithfulness, you think of automatically a dog, right? So we saw a little bit about the metaphysics of presence, and consequently the privileging of speech over language, because speech seems to be authenticated by the speaker because of the immediate presence of the speaker, and how Derrida seems to have dismantled this idea along with the many other privileging opposites, binary opposites. Then binary oppositions, how one part seems to be privileged over the other part, and there's always a trace left of each part into another. We understand trace as not being present, neither present nor absent, but as a simulacrum of presence, right? So whenever we speak of one thing, we automatically, that particular object or person or idea would carry something that is related to it, or something that is not in it. So man carries the traces of woman, and woman carries the traces of man, the idea of it, right? Children, grown up, old, young, all of it, each one seems to carry a trace of the other. So therefore, instead of actual exact signification, we are given a network of signifiers wherein each sign is understood only in relation to other signs, right? Therefore we come to the point of difference, because with this network of signifiers, what we understand is that there is never an actual meaning making happening. We are just redirected again and again to further signifiers. So what happens is a postponement of meaning occurs. Because of this postponement of meaning, we call it, what Derrida calls it, deferral. A deferral of meaning is occurring, right? So because of this deferral and the difference which helps us understand science, he created this one portmanteau word called difference. Now this difference would include both differ and differ. Differ as in binary opposition, or differ would be simply postponement of meaning. And hence all languages, all ideas are put under erasure, because you tend to believe that you have arrived at a certain idea, but ultimately what happens is you are left with furthermore signs to decode, right? So while you are decoding those signs, again you are given further signifiers which you once again need to decode, and the first sign that you started off with, that had to be erased, that needs to be erased. Why? Because it's no longer important, it no longer holds any significance, but then it still is to some level important because of our current level of signification. Because of that, the first sign would hold some importance. That's why you strike it out, but still you leave it on the text, right? They don't mean but differ, impasse, aporia, trace, all of it are ideas of difference, how they seem to create certain idea because of the difference they exist in. Now we saw how there is a privileging of speech over writing, yes, and how languages seem to be merely supplementing speech. Once again, Derrida asks, if speech is in itself complete, why does it need any supplement? And that too from something that is at a lower level from speech, that is writing. So what he comes to a conclusion, he comes to an understanding that writing itself is strong enough to support both itself and speech. So he removes this privilege, he breaks down this privileging of speech over writing. Then, so he says all language is under erasure, right? Every language, no matter what text it is you're dealing with, you may start off saying something, and ultimately what you started off with seems to become immaterial, because at the end you have arrived at something that you did not yourself predict. So we spoke of under erasure, how writing may be articulated by singing, speaking. Now writing itself seems to be encompassing speech as well. So this writing with W, big W, capital W. Now today we'll talk about aporias. So we've already spoken about aporia in our previous videos, wherein how we understood it as puzzlement or an impasse in a text, where there is no proper conclusion arrived at, there is some confusion left, right? So aporia is a Greek term denoting a logical contradiction, an expression of doubt, or impasse. So impasse would indicate a state wherein the complication remains unresolved. As in chess, when you're playing chess and you arrive at a point that neither can, like neither one can win, neither one can lose, right? So at that state where, there are no further moves left, both of them have to resign. They have, the game itself is drawn in the sense that is you are no longer you can no longer play any further moves. So that kind of stage would be impasse. Now Derrida feels that there are plenty of blind spots in a text, okay, plenty of blind spots in terms of metaphysical argument in a text. It is a situation where every element that makes a thing possible are simultaneously the same ones that make the thing possible. The very elements that make a thing possible are simultaneously the same ones that make the thing impossible. So you are left with a situation which cannot be resolved. You are left with puzzles. I mean, if you look into any novel or any poem for that matter, in poem you've got plenty of these impasses. But when you look at novels that are supposed to be very reasonable, even the the realistic novels, they too have these plenty of impasses. So blind spots, okay. So aporia would be something that contradicts itself, where you find, I mean, this is the place where you find that the text seems to contradict itself the most, okay, and would help you arrive at newer meanings, newer conclusions, your own conclusions. With the notions of trace, difference, and supplement, the text becomes a point where meanings from various readings interact and mingle together. Therefore, the factor of aporia is always there. So this factor of aporia is never absent. So next time you read something, try to figure out what the aporia of the text is. Okay, you'll find plenty in each text. Derrida famously analyzed concepts of gifting, hospitality. I mean, there are plenty of books Derrida has written on, plenty of essays he has written on all of these. See, for instance, like gifting. He speaks of how when we give a gift, what is the purpose of giving a gift to someone? You just offer a little bit of your affection. It is a sign of affection, a sign of respect, a sign of joy that you want to share it with someone. I mean, gifting, there is a whole lot of intent behind gifting. Now it has once again been reduced to a barter system, as in a bargaining chip. So when you give someone something, what do you expect against it? There are sometimes expectations concerning a return gift when your time comes. So if you have presented someone with possibly a home appliance on their wedding, there is quite a possibility that you too expect the same thing from them when your turn comes. right? So it is quite possible. So the idea of gift itself is lost. Even the hospitality, forgiveness, all of this. Why do we forgive? The idea of forgiveness is to let things go, and if someone has displeased you or caused you some kind of discomfort, you and that person apologizes, you have to forgive. At least you have to be in a forgiving frame of mind to forgive genuinely, but at least you offer words of forgiveness. It's okay. Yeah, if someone hurts you and they apologize, what do? The first thing you say is, it's okay, it's all right, I'm fine, I'm good. The point here is not that you are actually forgiving that person, because even after a while you might remember what that person has done, but you are actually using those words, it is okay, words of forgiveness, it is all right, and that's not a problem, no trouble at all. You offer these words of forgiveness for your own sake. So we are being selfish at every point. So the idea of forgiveness, which is supposed to be a generous, projecting a generous frame of mind, is not exactly generous in nature. It is quite selfish, right? You want your own peace of mind, that's why you're trying to forgive. Anyway, you can argue on both sides. Theoretically speaking, you can just go on and argue about everything under the sun. But Derrida tended to look at these concepts and realize that these concepts are forever elusive and can never actually be fulfilled. The idea of gift itself is lost when you start expecting a return gift, which is quite understandable in the kind of society we live in. This is one of my favorite cartoons. Calvin and Hobbes. Uh, as my artist, it's a fun example, of how Aporia works. As my artist's statement explains, my work is utterly incomprehensible and therefore full of deep significance. See, first of all, it is incomprehensible, and that's why it's too deep. So the idea being projected here is either that is twofold. First of all, it indicates that you don't have the depth to understand my work, and moreover, my work is so incomprehensible I cannot understand it myself. Okay, once again, look at the other picture here. There's never enough time to do all the nothing you want, as if you have got so much to do, right? And you don't have enough time to do it, and you don't have things to do, you have nothing to do, right? See, this is a wonderful statement, a wonderful example of aporia. Please reflect upon it. There's never enough time to do all the nothing you want. We generally spend a lot of time, not all of us, but those who can afford to spend a lot of time on doing nothing. It seems like, we don't have enough time to do nothing. It's a great way of looking at aporia. Now, I just included this one particular term that does not appear either in structuralism or post-structuralism or deconstruction, PHARMAKON. Now, why I have included this is you'll understand readily. See, the ancient Greek word pharmakon is paradoxical and can be translated as drug, which means both remedy and poison. So, what is a drug? Drug could be something that heals illnesses, right? And it could also be something that causes that causes a hallucination, that causes all sorts of unnecessary ills or evils in society, like cocaine and all of those. Even those are drugs, right? Alcohol is a drug in a way. So drug is understood to be something that both gives remedy and is also a poison. So pharmakon is a paradoxical word that includes both of it, right? So in Plato's pharmacy, and so Plato, I believe, already spoken about how Plato wrote so many Plato's dialogues, right? So one of those dialogues contains this thing called pharmacy. Now Derrida makes reference to the Phaedrus, an ancient dialogue of Plato, and Phaedrus is the dialogue in which he is written about pharmacy, okay? An ancient dialogue of Plato, and traces the meanings assigned to pharmakon. Plato first establishes an opposition between presence and absence. First of all, he speaks of, this idea of metaphysics of presence is not new. I've already spoken about that, how it has been discussed from the times of Aristotle, from the times of ancient Greece, right? So Plato first establishes the opposition between presence and absence. What is present, what is absent, and how they seem to, are counterproductive, or sometimes, simultaneously work together. Then writing is a far removed substitute for self-present discourse such as speech, right? He attacks writing as a far removed. So we've already spoken about how speech is privileged over writing, mainly because writing is distanced. Okay, it is removed. It's a far removed substitute for self-present discourse such as speech. So speech is something that is immediately present. It is self-present, right? So first of all, he establishes the opposition between presence and absence in this case. The Egyptian god of writing thought offers King Thamus writing as a remedy that can help memory. Thamus refuses the gift, saying that will only create forgetfulness. Writing is thus a poison, pharmakon. See, there is another reason why speech is privileged over writing, is because it seems there is one Egyptian allusion to an Egyptian god of writing thought. Now, this god of writing thought offers King Thamus writing as a remedy that can help memory, as in, like, whenever we are afraid that we might forget something, we tend to make a note of it, right? We write it down, right? So King Thought was offered this remedy to help his memory, and this remedy was nothing but writing. Now Thamus refuses the gift, saying that it only creates forgetfulness. So you see, what happens is, it is like a crutch. So Thamus believes that writing would be a crutch for him that would make him all the more disabled. Okay, that would enfeeble his mind. Enfeeble his mind, as in, like, his mind would become further weak, his memory would become further weak. Okay, because what happens is, like, whenever we are dependent on something, we tend to be less sure of ourselves. So if we are going to write down everything, what happens is we start relying more on the written word rather than on the memory. So only when you keep using your memory, it will be strong. Only when you keep using your brains to retain some fact, your brain will keep retaining it. It will further go strong. Otherwise, what would happen is that you will start depending so much on writing that ultimately your brain will become useless. Your memory will become useless. You get my point? So it is a very logical explanation Plato gives of the presence of speech over writing, and how speech is more necessary, more important, or more privileged over writing. It's a very good example. I just wanted to include this towards the end, mainly because to understand that there is always two ways of looking at things, or plenty of ways of looking at things. Just because Derrida intended to deconstruct all the privileged systems, it does not mean that they need to be, he needs to be right all the time. That is not the case. And well, I guess, yeah, these are some of the centrisms, right? How there are so many centers of phonocentrism, as in where it's privileging speech over writing, philocentrism, where male masculine attributes over feminine attributes. Then logocentrism, how reason and logic is made more important than instinct and emotion. Then truth. Ultimately, the quest for all of these centrism is looking for truth. But what is the nature of truth? How can we be sure of it? Never. So the world as we see is a vague semblance of an idea. It's just my own question. What we see, the way we see the world, is just a mirage. In some way, we tend to believe that we understand everything in the world, or at least some part of the world. But actually, what I find is that we have a very vague semblance of an understanding of those ideas around us. Thank you so much for your patient listening. Jazakallahu khair. Assalamu alaikum.